thanks everybody for coming down today. It's Native Day. Well, we got some native lovers down here. So, but we'll kind of talk a little natives, and we'll also talk nativars. Does anyone know that word? We kind of made it up a few years ago. So we would have cultivars of native plants. So we'll show a little bit of that too. But we also do have some natives down here. So who's new to classes up here? Anybody new today? Nice, welcome. Me and your dog, or just you today?
Just me today.
Okay, there you go. Well, thanks for coming. It's always fun doing classes. The sun's out. We were supposed to get a downpour last night, but I don't think it ever happened at my house. So we're watering again today. It's nice to do that in April still, right? Looks to water. So we'll talk natives. If everybody's got their sheet there, that'll kind of be some light nighttime reading tonight, right? It's 5 pages this week, so I try to put everything I can down there when I make these up. If we kind of talk about, you can see that the term nativar there. So again, just a specific cultivar of a native plant. I'm not down here to argue with anybody. You know, native is native and nativar is nativar. I kind of chuckle because a lot of this stuff was found in nature. You know, somebody's out walking through the woods and they see a plant of a different color or a sport of a tree growing off a conifer. They were able to package it and replicate it, and we have a new cultivar. So I'm not here to argue with anybody. If you're native, you're native, and I don't have a problem with that. But I think a lot of gardeners that I converse with like the idea of native. They like the low maintenance. They like certain qualities, providing for wildlife, on and on and on. And certainly, to be honest, nativars provide the exact same service as that native plant would. So a lot of times we're talking about something that just blooms a little longer, has a different foliage color, maybe smaller, larger, you know, different traits. And would I find that exact plant out walking up in the, you know, Pilchuck wilderness? No. But it's exactly the same, you know, species and everything else that we would have native to Washington. Now, we carry a few natives here. We carry plenty of nativars at our place. I have a problem sourcing a lot of things, to be brutally honest. I would have more if the price was right, but there's some great native nurseries around here. That's all they deal with. So not to send you off to another nursery to shop, but if that's your thing, look online. You can find places like Go Natives down in Seattle. I think Woods Creek is still out here on Highway 2 towards Monroe. There are some good sources. Again, if you're trying to just look at all the options you would have to choose from, particularly when it comes to perennials and wildflowers, that may be worth a trip too, you know, to kind of investigate as well. So if we kind of look at the benefits, again, you know, if we're going native, we're trying to add natural diversity to the landscape. Something native was born here, it's bred here, it grows here, it's where it belongs. It's used to our climate, it's used to the temperature, it's used to the dry summer. So all those things add up to maybe a little bit easier, especially in the drier summer. I'm sure everybody heard the proclamation of drought, which kind of made me chuckle, except for Everett, Seattle, Tacoma, which that doesn't make any sense. But it is, you know, we had less snowpack. It's going to be a tough year. I don't think we're going to run out of water. I don't think we ever will in Western Washington. You know, that's my own opinion as a citizen, not as a nursery guy. But something to be careful of, and I think it's a reminder to all of us. Natives are a good option for that, you know, a little less water in the drier summers here. But I think it's a reminder to everybody, just water wisely. You know, there's no reason to overwater your yard. And I think sometimes commercial properties, folks with sprinkler systems run them too often and too long. So we can save a little water, you can save some money on your bill and knock it down a little bit too. That'll certainly help. But if we mulch, we plant properly, we do things the right way. You're not gonna empty the reservoir by watering your yard here in the next over the summer. Okay, so we're trying to add natural diversity. We're looking to add benefits. One big thing for me when I added natives in my yard was wildlife and birds. You know, I love birds hanging out. What can I get for them for shelter, for food, berries in the fall, all the above. So that's a big one. Again, they're perfectly acclimated to our climate and soil conditions, and that's a huge one. We always have right plant in the right place. You know, some of us have clay, other ones have sand, but we get the appropriate native, and again, it's meant to be in that area, so it's going to thrive here in Western Washington. You know, I think sometimes the word native goes right with naturalize. You know, it's a tough one for me. I'm a little OCD, so I like my plants with separation and a little bit of this and that, but it's not for everybody. And if you want things that naturalize, there's a native. So I want to plant something, let it grow, root system, spread as a ground cover, whatever it is, but I can eat up some area with a lot of these plants that will naturalize a little bit, even reseed or propagate themselves some too. One big thing, I think, especially not down in California this year, but it happens up here a lot too, is erosion control. If I've got a dry bank, sun, shade, either way, I'm trying to keep soil intact. I think natives are a great choice for that. We can look at a lot of things that grow naturally as ground covers that would stabilize those areas, help retain our soil, and again, be low maintenance, less water, a little bit easier to grow. I'm a huge pollinator. Who doesn't like pollinators in here? You're banned from the class. No, I'm just kidding. Pollinators is a huge topic in our industry right now, and I think the public has kind of caught on. It seems when I'm talking to customers, they seem to care more and more about how can I plant some of these and save the bees. There's all these different phrases out now, and that's a huge part of life. We don't have bees, we don't have food. So we need our native bees to pollinate things. I was talking to a lady yesterday who wanted to kill all the ground bees in her yard. And I thought, no, I'm not going to help you do that, A. B, maybe try to get them to move to an area that's not right by your sidewalk. Plant something there. They need bare ground. But if we just continue to nuke the bees, we're not going to have the food. So that's a big thing with natives too, is that pollinator diversity, having natural sources for those things to stay happy. And then the last one there, again, drought tolerant. I mean, newsflash, we always have dry summers up here. It's wet for 7 or 8 months and dry for 4, and that's never changed. I've been here for 50 years, my whole life. That's what native is. It can withstand that winter wet, maybe a little less drainage, overwater. Then we get to dry season, and will it be alive still when we start to get the rains again in fall? And that's Western Washington in a nutshell. So if we have a native or a nativar of a plant that belongs here, we're going to have much better choice with things like that. So I brought up a bunch of plants here, and I'm going to talk kind of natives first, and then I'll kind of show you some other stuff that I think is fun that I use in my yard that offers, again, a little bit different traits as kind of as nativars as well. So if we kind of start with ferns, I brought all 3 up here because we actually have them all for a change. So I think everybody has sword fern in their yard, probably somewhere. If you don't, there's one across the street somewhere. So we have sword fern, we have deer fern, okay, a little bit smaller, a little different texture, and then we have northern maidenhair fern. We see this growing all over the woods here too. So we're talking shade, perhaps even a little dry shade in the summer. I think people are surprised how drought tolerant the ferns are. They get a nice deep root system and usually are okay even in the drier summers, especially because, again, we're in shade. But if you want to go native, all 3 of those are native species up here in our state. The big thing with the ferns, just keep in mind, the maidenhair is going to be perennial or deciduous. So this is going to die off in the fall. We cut the stems off, it's nothing in the winter, and then next spring, here we come from the soil a little bit. Every year, my clump will get larger and it will develop into a beautiful plant as it grows. But that's a fabulous texture plant if you like a little bit of woodland or dark shade garden. These 2 are evergreen, so I would have my structure in the wintertime. I have both these in my little native garden in my backyard. But the biggest thing I tell people is you can see the cute little fiddleheads coming up here every spring. So just because it's evergreen, quote unquote, doesn't mean I have to leave it alone for all eternity. I think your ferns are going to look a lot better if you walk out, maybe not every year, but I do mine every year because I'm a little OCD. So I walk out there before the fiddleheads replace the old growth, cut all that old leaves off, put it in the compost. I got a brand new plant every season because both those 3, 4, 5 years down the road will get a little tired. You walk out and be like, I don't know if I like those evergreen ferns quite as much as I did before, but if I do a little bit of pruning coming out of winter, March, April is ideal. If we wait too long, now we're going to be stuck with all the new mixed with the old. It's going to be a lot harder to get those fronds cut out of there. So I have a lot of people with a lot of sword fern, live in the yard. They planted it in banks. It makes a great perimeter. So that's an easy cleanup job. Maybe it's, again, not every single season, but maybe every 2 or 3 years, you're just giving those a little bit of cleanup. We've got lots of cool ground covers we can access here. I've brought a couple in. I've got a bunch of other ones out there. You'll see things like bunchberry. This is one I've let establish in a huge area in my shade garden. Look at that, it's even coming out of the hole of the pot. So this is in the dogwood family. It's a beautiful little plant, but Cornus canadensis grows native all over the Pacific Northwest. This would turn bright red, like a dogwood tree would. Again, perennial, go dormant in the wintertime. But this time of year, I got beautiful leaves and a little miniature dogwood flower here to look at as well. You'll see when the flowers are done, we'll get those little clusters of little orange berries on there as well. That's what they call that bunchberry. That's just great little food for some of the native wildlife as well. So again, if I have a woodlandy shade garden, that's an excellent choice for something that will naturalize. I'm not going to plant one and watch it sit there. It's going to spread with roots and pop up, and I'll have a beautiful carpet of it down the road. That does need a little bit of water. That's not one I would definitely call drought tolerant. I don't water my yard excessively ever at all, and I live right in Everett. But certainly if we get it dry and it's dry, it'll go dormant early, but then you'll see it come back again next spring. I was gone hiking for a couple weeks in August and mine disappeared while I was gone, but here it comes up in the spring, looks good as it did last year again, so they'll just go dormant a little bit early. So we have things like bunchberry. Everybody kind of knows the Oregon grape. I think the one thing we see with the Oregon grape is a few choices. So this would be our low choice Mahonia repens. This is just going to be short, again spread with stems and pop up and naturalize, but that's drought tolerant, that's evergreen. You can see a beautiful yellow spring flower for the pollinators, and that's something I can naturalize very easily as kind of a, I don't know if I call it a ground cover. We usually call those shrublets, you know, just a little bit of height on them and not super flat to the ground. So we have that one, and we also have a Mahonia nervosa, the leatherleaf Mahonia, a little different texture, but again, something much shorter that will spread and naturalize. And honestly, shade, not pure, I wouldn't do deep dark shade, but pure sun, part shade, you can grow that in a lot of different areas in a typical garden. So we have that. What else did I bring in here? I have some alpine strawberry, I think, out there. You'll see the fragarias if you like the native strawberries. Also beach strawberries, sometimes a little more towards the coast. We can use that as well. Knick, if you can spell that with like 8 N's and 8 K's in it. That we always have out in our sun ground cover table. So that's one of those ones we talked about earlier. If I've got a dry slope, hot sun, drought tolerant, I don't want to water, those little knicks work quite nicely for a little ground cover for erosion control. So the opposite for kind of hot sun. What else we got on there? I'm waiting for Oregon oxalis still. That's a pretty plant I have in my yard. So that's another native kind of woodlandy ground cover. Looks like a little 4-leaf clover. Spread slowly in clumps there. That's another nice little one for the shade garden. Salal. Everyone knows salal probably, right? The shrub, the ground cover, how it depends on how you want to prune it, would probably be the height on that one. So we always have salal. Sedum spathifolium we do carry out there in the sedums. So typically you'll see one called Cape Blanco, kind of a grayish leaf, nice yellow flower. But again, if I'm going hot, dry, erosion control, hot, sunny, rockery, places like that, that might be a good native type sedum that we can use, where we use a lot of the other sedums as well. We do get wild ginger in on occasion, and I didn't bring it in, but we do have wintergreen down there too. There's your wintergreen flavor for your gum, right? If you like wintergreen gum. So those got big red berries on them still coming out of winter, but that's another useful ground cover that doesn't grow too awful fast, a little bit slower as well, okay? Lots of perennials. We don't quite have the blue-eyed or the yellow-eyed grass in yet. We'll have those here pretty quick. That's a short little grass with a little flower again. Looks not really a grass, but looks like one, but it's got a little cool flower on it as well. We'll have those pretty quick. We do get some columbines in. You know, that's the kind of an example of a nativar. You know, if you want the dissent, I think it's Formosa is the species of the native one. You'd want to probably go to a native nursery. It's a little bit smaller creature. We get some that are close, but we do have lots of different columbines. You can see that blue and white one there on the corner as far as options as well. Pacific Coast Iris. Bleeding Heart is always a fun one. You know, again, we struggle to find the straight native species around here if you're trying to go for that. But bleeding hearts are all kind of in that same family. We would have an excellent choice of other cultivars or ones to choose from. The brand new one is short like our native, called the Mori Titanium, so that would have a little blue relief with a little white flower on it. But we've got red flowers out there, pink flowers out there, excuse me, gold foliage, green foliage. You can kind of pick a few different things when it comes to that. Trilliums, That's one usually you got to find the bulb, and we usually carry those here over the early season to get a trillium. It's hard for us to find plants. We do sometimes get some in the summer. They'll be done blooming by then. But if you like trilliums, that's a great little woodland flower that we see around quite a bit. Trying to find more Vancouveria. If you haven't seen that plant, that's a fun little shady ground cover. I've got a huge patch of it. Again, perennial, so it dies down in the winter. You can look that one up and probably find it around still. I know at some point we will get some in. We've got lots of Achillea out there, the yarrows for butterflies, again, pollinators, more for summer flower. Then again, you'll see the yellow-eyed grass. A few shrubs that we have that are native. I think probably the most useful native of all is evergreen huckleberry. Who doesn't like eating huckleberries, for one? You know, that grows everywhere. You know, I could have that in sun, I could have it in some shade, I can prune it, I can let it go natural, you can do whatever you want. But I think a lot of people have discovered how easy huckleberries are to grow, and that's a great Northwest native right there. So nice evergreen leaves. You can see the flowers are just coming out right now, blooming here for the spring into early summer, and I'll get those little dark berries on there that I can put in my ice cream and enjoy when we get to pick towards late summer, fall. If you can keep the kids or the wildlife away from them, that is too, right? I brought a flowering currant in. Does everyone kind of know that one? We just finished blooming, but that's our kind of red flowering currant. That's another Pacific Northwest native. So that's one I put in originally because I wanted to keep the hummingbird happy. So that's one of the first things to bloom on bare wood with those little bright reddish pink flowers. Great nectar source again for the early bees, but also our hummingbird friends as they come in kind of coming out of winter. That's usually in bloom sometime starting in March, you know, it goes into mid-late April or so. Now we have the foliage all season, turns color in the fall, and then we start again come next year as well. So just keep in mind with currants, you know, those get pretty bushy if we let them go, and that's fine for some people that want a little bigger specimen, but they bloom on old wood. So if I'm going to prune mine a bit to keep it down or control the size, I'm going to prune it right now when it's done blooming so it can grow all summer, set flower buds, and then I have full bloom again come that next spring, okay? What else we got here? Currant. I brought a juniper in. I usually say the word juniper and everyone's like, ugh, juniper. So Juniper's communis, gives us our gin, which is kind of nice for a summer gin and tonic, right? But common juniper, you know, is something more east of the mountains a little bit, you know, hotter, drier area. But I think, again, as we get into a little bit of climate shift and we're a little warmer, and again, we always have dry summer weather, nothing's going to need much less water than a juniper around. And that doesn't have to be the old rat's nest brown junipers from the 70s and 80s that I think everyone's pitched away at this point. We can get good junipers, you know, that again are very drought tolerant, really easy to grow, and will take the heat. So common junipers, this is a little nativar. This is the pencil juniper that grows straight up like a little telephone pole. But if I put that out in sun, you know, I'm going to have just a foot wide, 6-7 foot tall plant down the road. It's a perfect little narrow focal point. We can do the same thing with ground cover, you know, types of common juniper. We have some of those out there as well, and some that are a little bit shrubbier. But if I'm going to go for heat, you know, again, drought tolerant, easy to grow. Juniper's not a bad word anymore like it used to be, right? Leucothaway, I brought one right here in front, so everyone kind of see that shrub down the front there. So that's what we call coast leucothaway, and that would be another plant we would see native up and down the Pacific coast area. It's a really easy to grow shrub. You know, those aren't super huge, maybe 3 feet tall, a little bit wider as they get old. We can prune them. Gets a nice little white flower, but that one's for foliage color. Really pretty color. You can still see some red burgundy on it right now. In the wintertime, that thing's lit up red, so it doesn't lose its leaves. We would be evergreen with some nice foliage color, nice, easy, hardy native type shrub to grow. Okay. I brought one mock orange in here. Oh, right in the front. He's hiding. So this is Lewis mock orange, and this is again a named cultivar called Blizzard. But this is the mock orange, the species we would see growing out in the wild. Again, maybe a little bit more east of the mountains versus west, but a very easy plant to grow. Fragrant white flowers, loses leaves. And again, if I like mock orange and I'm like, you know, I'd like to get something that's a little more on the native side, look for the blizzard variety, because that would be a derivative of our original Pacific Northwest Mockhorn. So a little native on that one. We got regular. We showed you it's going to be Oregon grape overload today. I only brought 2, but we looked at the repens, the ground cover style. This would be our Oregon grape or grape holly that gets a little bit of size to it. So these aren't 8 feet tall, but I've seen older ones, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall as you get a little older plant. But again, evergreens, same little yellow nectar-rich flower. And I'm looking for something just a little bit taller for a shrub. Again, sun, some shade. You can grow that in quite a few different areas. But that's a very useful native to use around here as well. We're still looking. I did bring some osier willow. So if I got wet, you'll probably recognize this from growing a little bit in the ditches here and there. This is an osier willow, Alaska willow, some people call that too. That's come down to the Pacific Northwest. Again, wet soil is okay for willow. Sometimes we have an area that's a little heavier clay, excuse me, or even some standing water in the wintertime. That's when I see a lot of times in retention ponds and things even these days growing. Because it does take a little bit more water. And then the same idea, twig dogwood. I think everybody's probably got a twig dogwood. I've got quite a few in my yard too, but if you know twig dogwood, again, something we find all over the place up here. We can do yellow twig, red twig. Excuse me, is pretty much the native one would be the red twig. But again, if we talk nativars, I can get red twig with gold foliage or variegated leaf or orange twig. Different cultivars of these, maybe a little different size, but it's still going to be a good classic Pacific Northwest red twig dogwood. Okay. Snowberries will be in. Oh, actually, I missed red huckleberry. So I'm on the hunt. If you like red huckleberries like I do, who likes those? So we had like 200 of them last year. We scored, and I have 0 this year. I'm still looking. The guy that grew those for us decided not to grow them anymore because he said I'm the only one he ever sells them to. So we're trying to find another source. But that's a great native. If you go out hiking, you see red huckleberries growing in the old nurse logs and the stumps. So we would have a much taller huckleberry, loses leaves in the winter with the little red berry. It's a little more tart. I love the berries. I have one in my backyard in an old fruit tree stump I planted. But leave your name. At some point, we'll hopefully find some of those, but that would be another strict Northwest native as well. Okay. The snowberries will be in the summer. That's a plant that gets cut back at our growers here in the spring. It flushes out leaves. Those bloom in the summer and start bearing in the fall. So we would have white traditional snowberry and also the pink or chenolberry as well. We will have both those in, and we get a bunch of those. Usually it's about mid-June or so for the rest of the summer fall. There's a few trees. I'll be honest, at Sunnyside, we don't sell Douglas fir. We're not going to get big western hemlocks in. We don't get a lot of large conifers that are native. We certainly can order them in for you if you need. But this is the example to me of nativar kind of discussion. We would have a lot of cultivars of all those native type conifers, from Sitka spruce to shore pine to lodgepole pine to Doug fir to all of it, but just smaller versions. I think most people inherited enough 30, 40, 50-foot evergreens in their yard. We're in the evergreen state here. They might want something a little smaller. They like the idea of the native western red cedar, but man, I only need it 20 feet, or a little shrubby type and not so big in my yard. So we'll show you a couple of those when we get to the nativar time. So you'll see that second page again, nativars. We're providing a lot of the same characteristics that we would, but this is the kind of stuff I look for. If we're going to choose to carry something for you folks to shop here, what's the benefit of it? Is it bloom longer than the native? A great example is foxglove. Foxglove's not a Pacific Northwest native. I always hate bringing it up, but it was brought here so many centuries ago, and it's seeded everywhere that it is, I think we'd almost call it native now. It belongs here. It's the perfect climate here. Now, I could walk around and see foxgloves in all kinds of different colors from just natural diversity, but when we buy foxglove in, I got one here somewhere. You'll see them named. There's one right in the front here. You'll be named, and you see that one coming in. So you'll see them tagged as a specific color. Okay, so I can buy white, I can get pink, I can get something with spots on it. You know, and again, I could probably find every one of those shades out in the wild around here somewhere, but growers have said, you know what, that's a really cool color. Let's try to get a consistent bloom with that name on it, kind of thing. Keep in mind, with foxglove in particular, those are what we call biennials. Everyone kind of know that. So perennials come back year after year, easy enough, no worries. Annuals die in a year. Biennials are a little different. We got 2 years. So we need to let the seeds drop on those when they're mature. They'll give me more plants. If I plant that plant and I cut the flowers off and put them in the yard waste and don't let them grow to seed, my plant's gone in 2 years. I'm not going to have foxglove back. I tried that years ago and it's exactly how it works. So now I let the seeds drop, and then we just have more plants and frankly probably more colors, you know, a little bit more diversity in our patch of foxgloves as well. Okay, different color foliage. You know, that's a huge one with me. You know, flowers are fun, but what does the shrub look like when it's not in bloom? You know, and as an example, I'll bring up 9-bark. You know, we have Pacific 9-bark here all over the Northwest. If we go into the eastern 9-barks, a little bit different species, but same attributes, we've got all kinds of options. I've got a number of these in my own landscape because I love the foliage colors, but things like marmalade color, like that's one called Amber Jubilee. We can do purple, we can do copper colors, even dwarf ones now with smaller foliage. You know, really attractive little shrub, easy to grow, super cold hardy, you know, all the things we want, you know, kind of as a native type plant. Little bloom, little seed for the birds on there too, but really easy to grow, and I think a pretty manageable shrub, I think, for most landscapes. It's going to look like, wow, that's a really nice shrub, and you're getting some native benefits out of it as well. Nobody likes to spray. This is a huge one, right? Who likes to spray in here? Nobody likes to spray. So I'm always looking for disease resistant. You know, what's better? Is that better than the native because it doesn't get mildew? Or is that better than the native because we don't get this on it? So disease resistance, a big one. And I always bring up dogwood as an example. So I brought one there in the front, okay? If I drive down the freeway here this month and into June, we see all of our Pacific dogwoods, right? Cornus nutalii. You see those driving in the freeway medians and in the woods and the green belts. Big, huge white flower, right? But the problem with dogwood up here, I'm surprised it's thrived up here as long as it has, because they always get disease. They could be called anthracnose. So bad foliage, the plants struggle a little bit. The more shade, the worse they get. So man has taken Pacific dogwood and crossed it with Korean dogwood to get the same attributes that we want with our native type Pacific dogwood. Big flower, big tree, nice growth habit, but much cleaner foliage. So like that's the one I have in my yard. When I chose dogwoods years ago, I wanted Venus. That's a monster flower. I like the idea of having a native Pacific dogwood, but I didn't want to spray and I wanted cleaner foliage. So mine's probably 15, 16 years old now. It's 20 feet by 20 feet. It's spectacular in my front yard. But I get flowers that are that big when they're done, when they're open and bloom. And I think I've had 1 year in 15 when I walked out in the summer, like, yep, got a little bit of anthracnose this year. Cleaned up the leaves, didn't get it again the next season. If I don't sell nutalii, straight Pacific dogwood, for that reason, because I think people will just struggle with it. It's a really tough tree in the yard, I think, with the disease. So if you like the native dogwood tree look for flower, look for hybrids or nativars of that Pacific dogwood. So the two best ones are Venus and Starlight is the other one. Both big flowers, easy to grow, much nicer trees, okay? Tidier growth in the landscape. You know, I get a lot of people ask me for shore pine, and we don't have a problem getting shore pine. I see them driving out the boulevard. I see them in yards all over. We would find those growing all over the coastline in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a huge tree. You know, shore pine's not a 20, 30, 40 foot tree, but probably a 15-foot tree, but big bushy. You often see them if you go to the coast. They've got the windswept trunks, you know, kind of blowing whichever way the wind's going. So we don't really get those in, but we get a lot of dwarf versions of that. So if I'm looking for a shore pine, Pinus contorta, you know, for us, we would have a really cool kind of garden variety called Spawn's Dwarf. So again, you know, this is a great example of the native nativar discussion. Did somebody wave their magic wand and create that? No, that's not how it happens. But somebody was out looking at shore pines native ones and said, well, that's weird. He's got a different growth coming out of that tree that was found in nature. We pull it aside, we graft it, we see if we get a consistent variety, and that's how we get a lot of the conifers. So I would argue with you that all the dwarf conifer varieties of these are native because they were found out in trees. This isn't something that man created. But am I going to go out to, you know, the coastline somewhere in Florence or up, you know, up in La Push or whatever and find that growing on the beach? No, I'm not going to. If I look real close, I might find one up in an existing tree that they could cut. But that's kind of what we do for a lot of our native evergreens, is get a lot of the usable dwarf varieties in. So short pine's a good example of that. You know, easier maintenance, you know, on species versus natives. Now we have spireas up here, Spirea douglasii. I could drive up the road here and hit the wetland marsh area and see acres of it, you know, and it's really pretty in bloom. There's nothing wrong with the native spirea for sure, but that's again another plant that's probably a little mildew prone. It doesn't bloom a long time. It certainly serves a purpose, but if I like that idea, then let's look at other spireas. We have spireas that are crossed from all over the world. Foliage color, different bloom, longer season, double flower, all different colors. Those are all options as well, kind of for spireas. The last one there I put in kind of an example is, you know, bark color, or I'll add foliage color to that. So who likes vine maple? Everyone likes our kind of native vine maple. It's a sweet tree and there's nothing wrong with it, but I get a lot of people that are like, man, I wish I could just have a little different color on that, or some bark color on that, and still have that native look with vine maple. So we always have regular vine maple out there. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's a manageable size, usually multi-stem tree, might reach 12 feet or so in most yards, not super large. But I brought up a bunch of different ones because we collect a lot of cool maples here. But these are all vine maples. So I got burgundy foliage. Look at that cool little miniature one right there. We've got yellow salmon foliage coming out, and then can you see the bark in the back? These are just leafing out. So those are all cultivars or nativars of our native vine maple. We have Pacific Fire. I want vine maple, the same size tree, same foliage, same fall color, everything. But when it's bare in the winter, I want to look out and see orange, yellow twigs. Okay, we get a Pacific Fire. I've got Sun. I want some foliage color. I don't just want more green. Well, sweet, we get one here like Burgundy Jewel. This was found right out in Snohomish years ago, one of our local growers. So this is one right here. If I have sun on it, I'm gonna have a beautiful burgundy color all the way through the summer before I turn color. A little bit added interest that way. We have one over here called, it says Sun Glow, or is this Sunny Sister? There's the Sunny Sister. We also get Sun Glow. So same thing, if you looked at that picture, it would look almost more like a Japanese maple. Beautiful leaf texture, different colors going on. You can see it leafing out, real bright yellow, mango-y orange color. Well, it'll be a little more green in the summer, but just, again, a little more of an ornamental or nativar of our vine maple. And I think some of the dwarfs are really cool. This is Baby Buttons, I think, the new one. So that's a miniature vine maple. I was looking, man, it looks like a vine maple, but is it really? So that would grow a much smaller scale, like a little shrub, kind of something fun to throw in the yard if you're looking for a little different look for that native vine maple. So there's a few examples there. So you'll read through there. I won't go through all of them because we mentioned a few, and I'm going to show you a couple other plants. But you can see kind of some of the nativars that I like to use or see around in a lot of local landscapes. Again, Louisia. Does anyone know that bitterroot or Louisia? I brought a couple up because I use a lot of these in my own yard. They're just starting to bloom here, and most of these will bloom off and on the whole summer. But these are a little succulent. So if I was up North Cascades, you know, hiking up in alpine wilderness areas, I would see these growing in real gravelly, rocky soil. Like, how's that possibly living up this tall in the mountain area? So they get really cool flowers. It's a little low, clumpy succulent. But again, what man has done is said, okay, well, let's get an orange flower and a pink flower and a red flower and mix it up a little bit. And there's even some really small growers too. You can certainly find, you know, native Louisia up around for sale. But again, if you're looking for that benefit of the native, drought tolerant, I've got hot sun, I'm in a rockery, which is where all mine are. We put little clumps of those in there, get great texture, great flower, but I just don't have to mess around with the watering much. Those I hardly ever water at all, and they've been in for years. They're dry, they fend for themselves, because that's the way it should be with Louisia or bitterroot. I mentioned bleeding heart. You know, we'll see some of those out there. That's a plant we keep getting in through most of the spring here. A real fun one I like is this little Gallusacea we call buried treasure. So if I look at huckleberry, Vaccinium ovatum, you know, that's our native huckleberry. If we were doing this class like halfway across the country, this is what they would have for their huckleberry native. And this is a low one, just gets about a foot tall and spreads a little bit, turns beautiful red in the fall. But I keep a lot of these around because I think a lot of people like huckleberries, and this will grow just like our native one here. I can use these in a little sun, a little bit of shade. I get great foliage color, nice bloom for the pollinators, and then again a great tasting berry on there too that I can eat, or the birds will take from you if you leave them on there in the fall. So that's a little plant we call, it's got a, we always say it with the pirate accent, buried treasure, right? So buried treasure, we've got a bunch of those out back as well. I just sold out again of Aronia, but we'll get some more chokecherries in. That's another good example. You know, we have native chokecherry here, but most people don't want 10, 12, 15 foot big plant to keep the birds happy in the fall. Maybe you like the bloom, you like the berry, but I want something a little more of a garden size. So there's a lot of great nativars that different universities have produced of chokecherry these days. We tend to get in that low-scape series, they call it. Low-scape mound, low-scape hedger. So now I've got a chokecherry that stays down waist level, knee level, and not overpowers the yard. That's a really cool plant for flower here right now. Unbelievable fall color in the fall if you like a little fall color action too. And they do get those little black berries on them. And again, you'll see the birds and the wildlife snatching those up as we get towards fall when they come into season then. We saw the coast leucothaway. Now this is Leucothaway axillaris, our straight coast leucothaway. So that would be the native exact species I would see out growing. I've got other coast leucothaways down there. If you want a little bit more red, or you want a little twisted leaf, or you like a little orange tip on it, there's a lot of good nativars of leucothaway, same growth habit, same conditions, but just a little different leaf color if you want to mix it up a little bit. We mentioned the columbines, the common juniper, you know, hazelnuts, filberts. We always have western filberts or western hazelnuts growing around here in the woods often. So we can always do other cultivars of filbert again if you want to mix some of that in the yard. We talked about the dogwood. So again, Starlight, Venus are two really good ones. I put Eddie's White Wonder on there, and that was typically the one. You know, I've been doing this about 30 years, and Eddie's White Wonder was around when I started doing this 30 years ago. I hardly see it anymore because I think the newer ones are even better against the disease. So don't look for Eddie's. I think a lot of internet sites will tell you still to look for that, but look for these cultivars of the cross there. You're going to get the best Pacific dogwood with less disease. Lots of different elderberries. So we have native elderberry, and again, it's more green foliage. I think people know elderberry a little bit. You'll see those out in the woods. But we would get in a lot of cultivars of elderberry. So you can see like black foliage, lime yellow foliage on that one right there. So those would be useful shrubs. I have a couple in my own yard. I get the benefits of the elderberry plant, but I've got some really cool foliage color to look at as well. So the green one gets pretty big, our native one. These would be a little more manageable in size, but still a great flower. And if I have two different varieties of those, they'll cross-pollinate and I'll get the berries on there as well for the birds. So if you're looking to help the birds out, elderberry is a great choice as well. Okay, we showed you a few ferns. I think everybody kind of knows ferns love the Pacific Northwest. So we got some native ones, but certainly there's some other good cultivars down there, some different ferns. We looked at the currant, we looked at foxglove. I did bring a lupin in. Does anyone like lupins? Yeah, it's cool flowers. So we would always walk, you know, we had a place in Clallam for years, and I had meadows of lupin. You know, that was a free wildflower I got to enjoy in the pasture every year. But we typically just have blue. If you've driven around and seen lupin, we would have blues. So again, what man has done is saying, well, I love lupin. It's drought tolerant, it's great for the bees, it's easy to grow. That's another biennial. We have to be real careful, like the foxglove. We can't just deadhead it. We gotta let it seed to get our plant back. But what they've done is give us colors. You know, there's the husky lupin, I call it. You got some purple and gold on there. But we can do orange, we can do red, we can do pinks, we can do 2 colors on 1 flower. These are little different creatures that we'd have a much larger bloom on those. And if we deadhead, we repeat bloom a little bit, so a longer season of flower. But a lot of people, especially in England, have done some breeding on lupins here the last number of years, and there's some pretty cool lupins out there about ready to get to bloom. So if you like the lupin, that may be one to try as well. I think there's just a couple more there. We talked about the mock orange. Now I brought one mountain hemlock in. Does everyone see kind of on the right here? So that's another strict Washington native we would see growing up in the alpine, alpine areas. Mountain hemlock grows most of the western U.S. up in the high altitudes. I'm always really hesitant sometimes because that is not one for clay. So if you're going to do mountain hemlock, or alpine fir is the other one, if we put it in at sea level and we run water on it all the time, you're going to probably kill it. If it's in bad drainage, you're probably going to lose it here in a year or two. So if I've got really well drained sunny soil that I don't want to mess with and I like the native look, that mountain hemlock and alpine fir might be good choices for you. They're real pretty trees, super slow growing, and I see them a lot in yards. I mean, it's a great yard specimen, conifer, but just make sure you've got good drainage. That's one we don't want to overwater at all. Okay. 9 barks we looked at. We got all kinds of Oregon grape. Now this is native again. We have repens, we have Mahonia aquifolium, the shrubby one. Then we have Mahonia nervosa, which always sounds like some sort of weird mental disorder. But that's our low growing leatherleaf Mahonia. Those are all native, no question, ifs, ands, or buts about it. If we like Mahonia, but we want to add a little bit different season to it, again, man has crossed our Oregon grape with different species of Mahonia from around the world. So a lot of the Asian American hybrids like Charity, Arthur Menzies, Soft Caress, we get a lot of them in, have the same flower, have a similar foliage, much taller usually, bushier, taller plants, but I would get the nectar, the pollinator benefit out of it, and those are tending to bloom more in the fall or in the dead of winter, which is kind of nice. I put one in my yard because, again, the native one gets me into March, April, May. I'm fine with that. But January, February, if I had one blooming, again, my hummingbird's happy a little bit earlier, and the pollinators that are out early will have something to grab too. So look at some of those nativars of Mahonia. You'll see some options there for a little bit earlier bloom. I would never talk native, we didn't talk about rhododendrons, right? So we have native Pacific rhododendron macrophyllum, which I can hardly find anymore anyway, to be honest with you. It's hard to find species rhodies. But I would offer this. I think rhododendron is pretty much native to our state. So are we going to find, the 5,000 cultivars that are out there? No, we're not going to find them. But everyone knows rhododendron, knows this is the perfect climate for it, the soil, the conditions, all the rest of it. We water a little bit in the summer. We're always going to have really good luck with really all rhododendrons going these days. The couple I would mention in particular is Western azalea. Okay, so rhododendron occidental is actually an azalea. I did bring one up. Oh, there it is right in front of me. Just getting ready to bloom. So if I don't mind not having leaves in the winter, the Western azaleas are spectacular. This one smells incredible. I've got a yellow one in my yard that is stunning when it blooms, and the fragrance fills the whole backyard. But these would be deciduous type species rhodies, or azaleas in this case, that drop their foliage, but I get a much nicer flower, and again, a lot of times fragrance on those as well. So this is a light pink one called Irene Coster. Again, am I going to go out and go hiking somewhere and find that exact flower? No. I'm going to find other types of Western azaleas in a rainbow of colors. So these are merely pulled out and selected and named for a specific color. They want orange, I want red, she wants pink, I want white, whatever. If I grew these typically from seed, I would have a huge array of multiple colors in that same batch, if that makes sense. So again, I would offer that as a native as well, even though it's a named cultivar of Western azalea. There's certainly some nice occidental rhododendrons out there to choose from too. We do get some serviceberry. You know, serviceberry is kind of a multi-stem tree or shrub. Does anyone have serviceberry in their yard? You got a couple? It's a sweet plant. Again, great fall color, nice early bloom. Gets a nice size to it with age. Typically this side of the mountains we got to watch for rust a little bit because they like a little drier climate. So we would typically find serviceberry right up on the mountains or maybe a little east of the Cascades. But they do fine over here as long as we got good sun on them and we just monitor the rust a little bit. Usually in the wet spring weather, maybe a little bit more foliage issue on those as well. But we always have some nice serviceberries out there right now. Sumac is another Eastern Washington native, and that's one, again, if everyone has sumac in their yard, so that's one that grows and kind of grows and keeps growing and growing. I think at our place in Clallam, the one sumac specimen is probably 30 feet across, not super tall, but 30 feet across because the branches come up and reroot and it just keeps going and going until you prune it and tell it not to go. So we get that same staghorn type sumac in, but for us, I go for foliage color. I had one up here. Oh, there it is. It hasn't leafed out yet. So they're just leafing out. This would be one called Tiger Eye. So this would grow just like our native sumac would, but this will give me gold foliage all through the season. So if I like the look of sumac, I love the fall colors on it, the little antler flowers, you know, when they come up in the fall. But I want a little more foliage color. Then maybe again I look for a nativar or a cultivar of that native sumac that's got much nicer foliage color to it instead of more green. Okay. Last couple there we looked at the mock-orange or the vine maples, the twig dogwoods. Hemlock is another conifer, you know, that we get a few in. We've got mountain hemlock, but western hemlock is our state tree first of all. But typically I see those out in the woods. I'm looking at something 50, 60 feet tall. And I think most gardeners that like the idea of hemlock, because it's a beautiful evergreen, maybe don't have room for that native one. So we get, again, nativars or cultivars of hemlock in here. Little dwarf ones, bushy ones, weeping ones. We've got all kinds of cool hemlocks out there. Same growing conditions, great for kind of part sun, part shade, or full sun. But I can add in a little bit of foliage color. You'll see some white on some. This is a Canadian hemlock there called Moonfrost. Got beautiful white new needles on it, and that's a little shrub versus a tree. I've got one of these in my shade garden. This is a little weeping one called Cole's Prostrate. Looks like a ground cover, little miniature hemlock. That's a fun one as well. But you'll see quite a bit of choices out there for, I think, yellow foliage, white foliage, weeping, some really fun cultivars of cool hemlocks to choose from. Western red cedar, you know, if the roof wasn't up, I'd point to the neighbors and say, who's got room for that 50-footer in their backyard? You know, a lot of us have western red cedar as it is, and there's nothing wrong with them, but some folks just want something not quite as big. So there's a lot of choices for western red cedar these days. We can go narrow, we can go small, we can go dwarf, we can go all the way down to this. Is a pretty useful plant. Looks just like western red cedar, right? Same foliage, turns bronze in the winter, but that's a shrub. You know, that's only going to grow about 3 feet tall, 4 feet wide. So I like the idea of the cedar, get the same benefits, same growing conditions, all the rest, but now I have a little miniature version, a little shrub style. So we can do this in all kinds of different sizes on western red cedar. If you're trying to do a little hedge, or again, you're looking for a, you know, just a cool specimen that looks like the native again, but just as a shrub in the yard. This is one called Grünkrugel. Yeah, really cool little dwarf one. I always bring that one up because that's one of the few plants up here, especially for conifers, that we can maybe have a little heavier soil. People that have heavy clay, maybe don't drain quite as well. That may be a good dwarf conifer for you to use in those areas that, again, doesn't mind maybe a little bad drainage versus some of the other stuff. Okay. Wintergreen we talked about, and you'll see wintergreen out there. You see I put a couple like Berry Cascade, Cherry Berries, Winter Splash. We can do pink berry now, we can do white berry now, we can do red berry now, we can do huge red berry now, and then we can also do variegated foliage. So we have just the plain native wintergreen, but if you want to mix it up a little bit with some cultivars, you can change your berry or get a little bit different foliage as well. That's another easy one to do. Okay. So I think we probably got, did I miss any up here? You guys always know before I do. I think I might have brought up everything I brought up, all these nice plants. I think we, oh, there's a couple more evergreens. So you can see this little guy. So I always laugh because my younger son's 9 now, but this was, he calls Sitka Bruce, you know, Sitka spruce. But he couldn't talk when we used to hike, so he'd be like, Dad, is that another Sitka Bruce? Yeah, it's another Sitka Bruce, Max. So I kind of call it now too. So we've been to the largest tree on the west coast down there outside of Seaside, and Sitka spruce is huge. You know, I'm not quite the size of coast redwood, but I think they found some Sitka spruce up there, 150 foot or so, some big, huge trees. So Sitka spruce is native, you know, going all the way up into southeast Alaska. But I don't know if I've ever had a regular Sitka spruce for sale. We have dwarf ones. So this is a great little one called Papoose. So I like the benefit, again, of the native. It's drought tolerant, super heat tolerant. But now I just want a little tiny compact one. I don't need 100 feet. I'd like to have like 6 or 8 feet. So we buy a dwarf one. We would have a couple different cultivars of our native Sitka spruce up there. And then this is really fun. I've been trying to get these, and he finally sent me 3 last week. Can everybody see that? So what does that look like? Douglas fir. So this is our Douglas fir. Instead of having 80 feet, this is one called wagon tails. So this was found out on a native Douglas fir. It's not like they found it. We can get blue ones now. They've got weeping ones now. So again, these weren't created, but found on other Douglas firs as witch's brood. And this one's really fun. It'll get some nice size, a little small tree look to it, but it's going to be all contorted and kind of a fun little texture plant. So again, a lot of folks that like natives are sometimes okay with some cool nativars, and instead of another Douglas fir in the neighborhood, people walk by and say, that looks like a Douglas fir, but it can't be. What is that thing? And there's some really fun Douglas fir. We're adding, I just got a big one of these, we're adding down to the Arboretum down in Everett here in about a month. We're planting a new garden, and we're going to show off some of the new cultivars again of some of that native stuff around. So this is one called Wagon Tails. It's a fun little plant from Isley out there. I think that might be, I think I got all of them for a change. We didn't even miss one of them. So again, if, you know, I hope you look around, you know, kind of see what we might have to offer for some natives. I'm always happy to look for anything. There's some things we just can't find. I called a couple new native places, and the problem, it's not a problem, it's a good thing. But so much of the growth they do is for contracts. So Department of Transportation, the county, cities, because everybody's planting natives, which is awesome, especially when we're doing projects, public works projects kind of thing. But I'm on waiting list for all of it. You know, there's some things I would love to have, but either the price is outrageous. I'm like, nobody's going to pay that much money for that little native when they probably take their shovel out, go pull it out of the ground and take it home, you know, kind of thing. And again, I'm not trying to send you to other nurseries, but you know, if you're hardcore, because this is a subject I get asked a lot about, is native, and I don't want anything that's not native. It's fine, it's your yard, and there's nothing wrong with going native, but I would implore you to search out options around here, because there are some strictly native nurseries. The Swansons, the Skies, the Sunnysides, the Christiansons of the world are never going to have access to the amount of natives that those guys do. So I'm not trying to pawn you off to another nursery, but if you're looking for specific things, certainly ask us. We can try, but if it's something we can't find, we would certainly point you towards one of those little local native nurseries as well. Okay, Native Plant Society is awesome if you're involved with that at all. They do some excellent work around here. That's another good resource, I think, for a lot of homeowners. You can look at and talk to them, you know, about certain things as well. You know, but if I punched up a, you know, Western Washington native plant list, and I had, say, 300 things on there, from flowers to perennials to ground cover to tree to shrub, you know, yeah, we can find, you know, 40 or 50 of them probably pretty easy. The rest of them we struggle to find, you know, just to be honest. So there might be some places that do their own growing that you could access some of that as well. Okay, so hopefully it was worth skipping out of the sunshine for a minute today. We were supposed to have some rain last night, but it didn't happen. I was hoping it would downpour last night, but we got windy, we got a little bit of rain, but it's certainly a good day to go shopping. If you guys tell the cashier up there you were at the class, Anything that I had up here and probably most other things in the property you can probably complain about, and they'll give you your 20% too. So they'll get 20% off all the plants. This is a hard one for me to program in the computer, so you could probably play dumb and see what you can get 20% off. How's that? Like, I don't know, he had one of those in the class. I can't have 20% on that? So hopefully do a little bit of shopping. The discount starts today, but you got till Friday. So I know yesterday it was crazy busy again in spring at the nursery. I don't think we sold out of anything, and all this stuff I ran around with 2 carts and plucked it off the table. So all this stuff we should have plenty of up there still to choose from if you want to do some shopping. All right? So got any questions? Yes?
Yeah, ferns for sun.
Yeah, now I'll be honest, this one no, okay? Sword fern, yes. I can have sword fern pretty much anywhere in my yard I want. You know, we can put that in sun, we can put it in shade. If I'm going native, definitely sword fern. There's a couple others will take a little bit more sun than shade. Always good for woodland gardens, but if I'm going sun and I want evergreen, I go straight for sword fern. That would be your most durable one for sure. Yeah, sword or deer. I always forget about the little deer fern. That's a favorite one in my yard. Yeah, deer fern there would be the other one too. Yep.
What kind of potting soil if you have them in a container for
yep.
ferns?
Ferns, you just want some, you know, a little bit more moisture retention's okay, but we don't want it sopping wet. I'm still probably going to go with that Edna's Best, you know, potting soil. It's good for all purpose, everything. Well, and that's another good option because that's got a little acidity built in. As long as, you know, for me, when I'm planting trees and shrubs, I'll either buy what you brought up. We have a hybrid soil. It's called the acid planting mix. So I can use it in the ground, mixing with my native and planting a rhodie or anything acid loving, or I can use it just as a potting mix and it works great. Blueberries, all kinds of stuff I use it for. So that, or I typically take Edna's, fill my container almost to the top, but I'll take a couple heaping handfuls of compost, then mix that all up a little bit too. You can do either one. And kind of the acid mixes that they kind of did it for you. Yeah, they mixed it up, mixed it together for you. Yeah.
So is it the sword fern that kind of reseeds itself? I have little ferns coming up all over.
Yeah, I mean, if you've looked at fern, if I look at the bottom, you'll see all your little spores getting ready to go here later. It could be, I would guess it's probably sword fern. That's usually the most prolific one around here, and the biggest, bushiest one as well.
I've got little tiny.
Oh yeah, save them, save them. Yeah, that's a good one to save. You can bring them down and sell them at the native plant centers. Yeah. Yes.
This is a great presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no worries.
I want to tell people though that on your next hike, please don't bring a shovel or a trowel.
Yeah, don't take stuff
Start
up.
digging up. In fact, some of it is illegal, like trilliums.
Yeah.
So please be careful about that. So
Yeah, don't ever. That's bad. That's bad mojo. Yeah, we do not dig up plants and take them home.
Yeah.
Because I see it happen all over the place, and that's never a good thing. Yeah. Hopefully, well, I shouldn't say hopefully the plant will die, but steal it out of the woods. I hope it does. It'll teach you a lesson. Yes.
We have a lot of thorn bush growing on the sunny side, and we're taking it out. What do we replace it with that's just as aggressive?
A lot of thorn bush. Like you got blackberry.
Blackberry.
So
Yeah.
not the native. That's not even a native blackberry. It doesn't even belong here. Cascade blackberry would be the wood to replace it with. That's a lot much lower. What's that?
I want to replace it with something other than any kind of thorny bush.
Okay, so no thorns, no more bleeding.
Something outcompete thorn bush. What would I?
Or blackberries.
I don't know that you're going to outcompete blackberry. I'll start with that.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to get rid of the blackberry before we start with something else. Yeah, there's nothing's going to outcompete the blackberry. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, so get it out, roots, everything. Watch the shoots when they come back up. But if you were going to naturalize with something, I think there'd be a lot of good options. I mean, is it an area that's a little wet, a little dry?
Quite sunny.
It's quite sunny.
It's certainly wet.
I mean, it's stuff that's really going to root and create a barrier. I mean, I'd look a lot at some of the willows, and I'd look at twig dogwood for sure, because that would naturalize a little more, and you'd have a little more root system, and that would spread kind of like the blackberries. But the problem with blackberry is it arches over and then re-roots, and you get a thicket. The twig dogwood would get you a pretty thick clump in there, and it would keep a lot of stuff from coming back. That's what I put on my bank years ago, because I was trying to keep everything else out.
So to get rid of the thorns, you got to get the root balls out.
You got to get the roots, and you might think you got all the roots, but you're still going to have to get some more roots after
You
that.
have to do it for multiple years in a row, I guess.
Probably 2, I would say, unless you get. I took an excavator to my hillside years ago, and I was done in 1. But I don't know that you're going to get an excavator in there. So what I would do is get out all you can, and then really monitor it, because you're going to either have to dab a little brush killer on the foliage or continue to dig as you see sprouts come up. The problem with the blackberry is interconnected root system down in the soil, and you're just never going to get all the roots out of there.
What brush killer?
I would not spray, because again, you're getting on everything. But if you paint it on shoots as they come up, let them get a little leaf on them, and then just spray those shoots or paint them. We do BK32. That's probably as good as any. Yeah, that's the brush killer we carry. That's pretty good with blackberry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Got anybody else? Nice. Get out in the sunshine, right? Thanks for coming.